Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast. It's your host Shivam, and today's episode is going to be an exciting deep dive into the world of LLMs and prompt engineering. We have got a fantastic guest lined up for today. Meet Sohini. I have been following Sohini's insightful content on LinkedIn for some time now, and I can't wait for all of you to hear firsthand from the woman herself. So let's get started. Sohini, so how did you get into generative AI?
Well, thank you for having me. For generative AI, I think it started somewhere around February, March of 2023. I've been following, ChatGPT 3 when its launch happened in November of 2022. So it's almost a year back now. But at work, I'm a senior manager for AI computational design. Recently became the director for AI. So somewhere around February, we were working on coming up with what are some of the AI and machine learning tools that can be used within the company. So that's where generative AI became a part of what I was asked to take a look at. So our initial team was just me and an analyst. We started experimenting with ChatGPT. So we all had our we bought our paid subscription to the OpenAI's Chat GPT, and that's where the initially it was GPT-3. Then getting into understanding what the Da Vinci model was. Then 3.5 got launched, and then there was Chat GPT-4. So somewhere around February, March, I believe Chat GPT-4 was launched, and March, April. That's where we started experimenting more. So the use case within the company, it was specifically for finance. So it's a finance chatbot. We need to finally come up with a finance chatbot, and what is the feasibility, what needs to happen. LangChain, I believe all of the framework was devised somewhere around that time it was released. So we started understanding that there are a lot of things that can be used for corporate usage, and then there's some things you cannot, like LangChain. Typically it is built as an OpenAI access. If you are a researcher, or if you are just curiosity is what is propelling you for academic usage, you can use it. But if it is corporate products, you cannot really utilize it without having the licensing fee. So our goal was to start with LangChain, but build the whole LangChain framework without using LangChain. So build our own customized LangChain. So that's what we started working on all over April. May, I believe, where we were able to show the first cut of the finance chatbot that we were working through. And that's where we found there were many challenges with working with foundational models, because there are so many. So there was Llama, there was again GPT-3 was the one that was cleared by the company. Then again, there was Palm that was launched. We had to constantly be experimenting around them in order to figure out which one is the best, right? Because we're using some very specific company, data in that case. So it took a good amount of time to get everything whitelisted. But that's where we figured out that prompt engineering was the source. The prompt engineering was the key in order to have a stable product using ChatGPT or large language models. So
Hmm.
prompt engineering, we dived very deep into prompt engineering before even any of the advanced prompt engineering guidelines were generated, understanding that there are major changes and major ways in which prompt engineering can minimize hallucination. So because our use case was very different from most of the other use cases, because most of the other use cases, if you think they are B2C, that means you
Hmm.
want general people to use it, and how they interpret it, it's up to them, right? So if there are some wrong answers, people will probably not mind. That's okay. Oh, all right, so this is, I take it lightly. But if I'm using it to plan my financial future, that's not something that you can take lightly. Especially if you're building a product which is B2B, which is you're giving it in the hands of decision makers, and they have to make some very key decisions based off of the responses that's coming out of it. There is a lot of ethical repercussions that you have to take into considerations, and also make sure that it is as hallucination free as possible. So that's the reason why we dived deep into prompt engineering, and understanding that prompts can be taken apart. Again, the different LLMs, they support different sizes of tokens, right? Sometimes it's 2000, sometimes it's 4000. Typically GPT-3 used to support 3000. Now the GCPs, Google's Palm, it can Bison can support up to 8000 or 16 or even 32,000 tokens. So those are the advantages that we started seeing in order to have conversations. RAG, retrieval augmentation generation, that was something that we experimented with a lot. But yeah, I think the major turn point came to us somewhere around summer, where we realized that it was prompt engineering, but we really had to do advanced prompt engineering because it is going to be put into the hands of decision makers. So you cannot really take any response lightly. And that's where that's where most of our focus and motivation has been in order to
That's
excel with prompt engineering.
Yeah, that's a great journey. I believe like you started like most of the time when I talk to the people, it's like similar. Like you start with something basis, then when you get inside it, then you feel okay. Now there are lots of things that you can do, and there are lots
Agreed.
of things that can go wrong. And especially the precision and accuracy is the topmost, I would say, the factor in case of B2B, as you mentioned.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed.
like as you mentioned, like there were lots of challenges that you faced, and you found prompt engineering as a solution to those challenges. Coming to this point, like what were the challenges that you faced in prompt engineering itself? Like in doing prompt engineering, what were the challenges you faced?
Sure. And I think people are starting to talk about it a little bit more, but domain specific prompt engineering is very different from generic prompt engineering. And that is something
Okay.
that I wanted people to understand and appreciate. What do I mean by that? The domain specific means whenever there is a particular domain that has a lot of specialized keywords. So one extreme end of it is medical jargon, right? So
Hmm,
the same pathology can have different names, and these are very long names, and that is typically hard to follow. So that's a very specialized domain where you have to do fine tuning. There is no other way. You have to build something either from scratch or you have to fine tune. Then the
hmm,
second domain is somewhere around legal domain, where again there are certain jargon that means something very different from normal English, right? So that's the
hmm,
reason why even around legal jargon, sometimes it is more necessary to fine tune. But then if we come to these domains that are not really that specialized, but still there are a lot of ways. I mean, there is a method to the madness,
hmm,
essentially. So, for instance, if you take a very simple example like SAP, if you
hmm,
typically ask me how is SAP doing to GPT-3, it'll think it's you're talking about tree sap, right? So it's goo that comes out of the tree. But SAP,
hmm,
I'm talking about the company, right? So how would a system know that I am asking about the company and not really about the tree sap? So
hmm,
that's where it happens that in a domain such as finance, there are so many specialized keywords that there has to be a separate section where you define all of these keywords altogether. So that's what we call the preamble. Then we had to experiment somewhere around with the persona. What is the kind of tonality that should come out for every single response? For instance, if it's a what question, if I'm just asking, okay, what is the GDP of this particular country right now? This is a very straightforward question, and in this case, the tone can be authoritative, where somebody can say, "This is the GDP. I'm super confident about it." But if the question is, how can the GDP be improved? In this case, your tonation, your intonation needs to actually be modified because you're not really confident. Even if you give like 1,000 ways to the large language model for it to, mine through and tell you the most important ones or the most relevant ones, there is always this level of doubt. Are you really sure that this is the only thing, or can there be anything else? So the
yeah.
tonality in your response needs to be a little more moderate right now. You can say, okay, these are the few factors. Now, please, you make your decision how it can be enhanced. So we had to play around with the personas. Then there was also the templates like LangChain has. LangChain already gives you standardized templates, but the templates for responding to each and every question can be different. For instance, if you're trying to say, how is inflation going to impact GDP of a particular location. Now, finance can give you a different way of answering that. If you go to HR, payroll domains, they will give you a different way of answering that. So there is a business context that you really need to extract. So I believe that is where most of we have been spending most of our time in order to extract the business context. How do the decision makers want the answer? Maybe they want to take a look at finance first, then they want to look at HR first, HR next, then they want to take a look at what are the predictions, then they want to see how can the predictions be corrected. Is it always these four bullet points? Are they always in this order? What is the order in which the decision makers really want their responses? So disambiguation of whatever the users are thinking versus what they are seeing in front of them, that was a very pivotal moment for us as well, because a lot of times what we were seeing is the responses were accurate, but the users were giving it a thumbs down, and we didn't understand why are they giving it a thumbs down. It's giving you exactly what you needed. It was sometimes, maybe it was over analyzing, sometimes it was under analyzing. So finding that sweet spot along with the parameters, and also is how much context you need to be giving, it really depends on the business domain. So finance is a very separate use case where there's a lot of fine tuning that needs to happen. Similarly, if you are looking at some of the other specialized domains, such as it can be pricing, it can be forecasting, weather, whatever it may be, you really have to listen very closely to what the users are looking for, understand the user story, and then based off of that, your prompts and the templates need to be very very different. So these were some of the major learnings that we had in a nutshell.
Definitely. These were really quite, I would say, very, like you discussed it at a very depth level and with a very good examples. So
Hmm.
one thing that you mentioned that like you were giving the right output according to you, but users were giving you thumbs down. Like
Yeah.
so whenever we discuss in our AI community, we find that evaluating that output which is being generated from LLMs is another challenge. So
Yeah.
how do you evaluate generated output text from LLMs?
Yeah, so I think that's our latest paper actually. I had posted on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy if you'd like to share that with folks as well. So it's called
Definitely, I would.
hallucination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys,
It's
so we
called
will add the link of the blog in the description. Please check it out.
So this is called hallucination minimization framework. So what we do is, this is how I like to describe it. Every single one of the responses that comes out of the large language models, we typically have an English teacher and a math teacher sitting on top of it. And what the
Okay.
English teacher does is it checks for the context. So if I asked you about, India, if I asked you about South Africa, if I asked you about, North America, is the response really about these areas, or is the response about some other location altogether? So are you maintaining context or not? That's what your English teacher is checking for. I asked
Okay.
you about a particular country. Your prompt had details about some of the countries, or maybe even excessive, and your response has a particular context. Are all these three matching or not? If at any point, if we see there's a mismatch, we give you a 0 score. If it's a match, then we give you a 1 score, right? So thumbs up or
Okay.
a thumbs down of this English teacher. And then there's a math teacher. This is something we figured out very early. Large language models are poor at math. They just cannot do math, which is fine
Yeah.
because that's not something that they were trained on. So that's the reason why, even though if you use a temperature of 0, you may still see that your response, if you're trying to find like an average, or if you're trying to find the minimum, it might not do a good job. So that's why what we have built is we have built analytical modules in the backend that are doing this mathematical manipulations for the large language models. For instance, let's say that I have a lot of, I have invested a lot of my 401k into a different stock options. Now I want to know what are the stocks that are doing well versus what are the ones that are not doing well. Now, doing well versus not doing well, it's a very subjective term, right? So for first of all, I need to figure out what is the average, stock rate that every single one is going at, what is the standard deviation. And then I see each and every one of the stocks, how away are they from the mean and the standard deviation, right? So I have an analytical module in the back end, which is doing all of these mathematical manipulations altogether, and it is just feeding the right numbers to the large language model. So the large language model is not doing any mathematical manipulations. I'm just giving it the data and giving it the instructions. This is how you put them together. This is how what your outcome should look like. So now what we do is the math teacher, it's checking every number in the response. Is it matching the numbers that was there in the prompt or not? Or are you building any number, from your mind? So are you pulling any number out of the thin air or not? So that's what the math teacher is doing. It's checking, is any of the numerical results, is it already there in the prompt, or did you just make it up? If you made it up, then again it returns a value of 0, otherwise it returns a value of 1. Then the third parameter we take a look at is called sensibility. Sensibility means typically in large language models, whenever it's talking about numerical manipulations, it can be off. For instance, it can say the stock prices have increased with negative 2%, which is nonsensical, right? If there's
Yeah.
an increase, it should be positive, and if it's a decrease, it should be negative. So these are the nonsensical responses that we check for, if it's sensible or not. And finally, the fourth criteria is uniqueness. That means I gave you the prompt. There was a, maybe this is a particular language that I'm using. Are you regurgitating what I just gave you, or at least did you paraphrase? Did you rephrase whatever I gave you? So these are the four things we are checking for. And based off of each and every one of them, we are associating a confidence score to the large language model's response. So every LLM response comes out with a confidence score, low, medium, or high. High confidence means that the user knows there are no hallucinations, the context is right, the numbers are right, it is sensible, and again, there is no regurgitated. Low confidence means there could have been some numbers that have been hallucinated. So in these cases, tread with caution. Medium typically means that the language may not be what the user really wants, but the numbers are all accurate. So that's the reason why we have three different grades of the scores that we provide along with the large language models, so that the users get a confidence that, okay, you understood my question, or maybe I should rephrase my question so you understand it better. So that is something that we have engineered along with our system. And again, this is available on the paper. I'll actually be releasing a YouTube video again on my channel in which I talk about all of these steps. But yeah, that's what we have done in order to make sure that the quality of every single response is also presented to the user, so the user understands, what should I do next? Should I take your response as is? Should I modify my question and maybe ask it in a better way? Or can I do enough with the quality of the response that I've got? So
Okay, so if I'm getting it correctly, once you say like you have an English teacher, you have a math teacher, basically to get the feedback, then they need to read this output manually to give thumbs up or thumbs down,
yeah.
and then you can use those things to calculate the overall score, the quality score which you are mentioning, if I'm correct.
So actually no. So this the thumbs up and the thumbs down has no bearing on this quality that comes out. So every single
Okay.
response comes out with a quality. And then it is up to the user to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right? So we have seen
Okay.
a lot of instances where the quality comes out to be high or medium, and the user has still given it a thumbs down. Those are the
Mhm.
cases where we start pondering what really happened, because the system is telling you there is no hallucinations, and it's a high or a medium confidence. That means the numbers are all accurate. Then why did the user really give it a thumbs down? And in these cases, our analysis has shown, and it's typically the domain specific jargon that is required, which was missing, and that's the reason why people give it thumbs down. Oh, I can give an example. Like
Yeah,
somebody
sure.
asked a question, what is SAP? Okay, so it was a very
Okay.
very simple question, what is SAP? And in this case, the response actually came back with, okay, the SAP is this particular company, and this company's revenue is in this much dollars. And the user gave it a thumbs down because they did not want the dollars. They just wanted that this is SAP. They just wanted the definition, but they did not want the numbers that went along with it. So ideally, they wanted a definition. But instead of asking, define SAP, they said, what is SAP?
Hmm.
You see, there are different ways of asking the same question. And so
Yeah.
this is the reason why whenever the user gave us a thumbs down, what we have now built is a follow-up question generator. So whenever we see that the user gave a thumbs down, we ask the user, is this a better clarifying question that you would like? So rather than just as you get the thumbs down, we said, did you mean define SAP? If the user clicks on define SAP, then only the definition comes. And in this case, the user is now happy. So what we've seen is these clarifying questions, they actually help the user fine tune their question asking mechanism. It's not always question answering, it's the question asking as well, right? So you're helping the user ask the right question, so then they are happy with the quality of response.
Great, great. And the method of evaluations which you just described, like the
Yeah,
quality score, that
yeah,
is being calculated automatically.
that's correct. It has no bearing on the thumbs up, thumbs down. It's an automatic, every single response comes back with a quality score, low, moderate, or high.
That's great. So can you please tell us more about that?
So yeah, absolutely, and all of that is actually in the paper. We came back with six different mechanisms, six different metrics that we are taking a look at, and again, this is fine tuned mostly for the finance domain because here, as you can see, there is a interplay between numbers and English, right? So there is the
Yes.
numerical part of it as well. For a domain that doesn't have that numerical aspect of it, this will not be relevant. But essentially, think of it as a knowledge graph mechanism where the prompt has a knowledge graph. The prompt or the text that you're providing the large language model, it already has a knowledge graph. What you are seeing is the response. Is it a subset of the parent knowledge graph or not? And these are very simple NLTK based modules, very simple libraries. They are not bulky models. They are they're relatively straightforward and light that you can apply so that it mines all of the text from the response, not from the question, from not from the prompt, but from the response, and it will automatically figure out is it's the English teacher and the math teacher, just as I was talking about. These are very simple NLTK or spacey modules that you can build on top of your responses in order to generate a confidence score for your responses. So it's a very knowledge graph derived solution, very elegant in the way the six metrics that we have defined. And ideally, whenever there is the interplay between number and text, they are scalable. That's what we found.
That's great. So for that knowledge graph, did you have to train any kind of a model or fine tune any
No,
kind of LLM?
no,
Yeah.
no. So coming back to, I think I can answer your question in two parts. There was a solution again that gets thrown around a lot is why don't you ask the LLM itself what is the
Yes.
confidence that it would apply to it, right? And I somehow do not agree with that mindset. Just because this comes again, all of these concepts are ingrained in machine learning. This comes as a part of semi-supervised learning. Semi-supervised learning, this is the paradigm called co-training. Co-training, that means if you have two experts and they both disagree in their outcomes, what do you do? So let's say the large language model gave you a response and you gave the question and the response again back to the large language model and say, hey, can you give me a confidence score? If the confidence score now is inaccurate, there is no way for you to figure out what went wrong. So that's the reason why using a large language model in order to score a response is a bad idea. Because just in the paradigm of code training, there is no way for you to figure out who was off. Was the first LLM off or was the second LLM off? Now, what we decided to do was to build very simple NLTK. So NLTK again is a very simply again it's a Python library, or you can use spacey pre-built models as well. Very simple in its execution. We go sentence by sentence for every single sentence that is there in the response. You take every sentence at a time. You extract the named entities from them, and then you detect is the context same as what was asked to you or not. So we didn't have to retrain anything. They were all off the shelf spacey and NLTK modules that we could use in order to build this English teacher and math teacher.
Great.
I believe.
That's really great actually.
Yeah, and it's all there in the paper. How we and this is a very simple implementation of the knowledge graph. Currently, I'm actually this week I'm working on a little more sophisticated version of a knowledge graph, which can be used in order to just take even if it's not a numerical domain. So if it's any language domain, in order to track hallucination. So that's feasible as well. It's a max domain cut graph theory based approach. Working on it right now. I'm hoping I'll have a first cut or base paper ready in the next month or so.
So when you are going to launch the paper?
Hopefully in another month. Let's see.
Any date for our peoples, whoever want to read it, so we can
And
share with them
absolutely,
at that time.
with papers, it's always depends on how much time we get on it. But I'm hopeful, but that by early February there'll definitely be something for me to share on our
Great,
paper.
great, great. So definitely, like a member from our community would love to read that paper, and we would love to share that paper from our side as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So moving to the last question. So how do you ensure you are up to date with this evolving landscape of this AI field?
Yeah, it's a reading and writing papers, I believe, is the best way to do that. So before, if you take a look at the hallucination minimization, the paper that I was talking about, the first version, it had about 43 or 45 citations that we extracted from. The best way to learn is by doing. That's how we always say this. The same thing applies for any kind of research. So whenever you start writing, you see, okay, let me find the next citation. Oh, okay, something else was there. So it's always one leads to the other leads to something else, and then that's how you get the whole cobweb of knowledge, I believe. So the best way of staying updated, again, blogs are plentiful. Following them is definitely good, but also getting into the citations of it. So looking into what was the base paper, do you follow it? Like for instance, right now I'm looking into large multimodal models rather than just large language models. That means it's not just text, but if you had images or if you were generating videos, what are the commonalities, what are the dissimilarities? How would you actually go about going from one to the other to the other? So again, it's going to conferences, reading blogs, articles. I know even in YouTube right now there are so many different channels, and so many different. Even with Gemini, I know that there are currently a few videos on how to use them. So yeah, trying out maybe a few of them from time to time, reading as much as you can, but also following the references. It's not just read a one blog and forget about it. Just follow the references there as well, because that's where you'll be able to make the right connections and go on to the next topic of interest rather than just reading one document and forgetting about
Great, great. So thanks a lot, Sohini, for sharing your insights. And definitely, guys, please check out the paper once it is out in like sometimes February. We will also share the paper in our community. So please do check it out. And if you have any questions, do let us know. We will reach out to Sohini and we'll get the answers for you.
it. Yeah, and
Thanks a lot, Sohini, again.
I highly motivate you guys to follow my videos as well. I think I'll be posting a little bit more on my channel, AI with Sohini, and more than happy to read through all the comments and create new videos based off of what the users are.
Great. Okay, Sohini. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.